So today I want to recap Lincoln Riley's press conference and all that's coming up after the bumper. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on Step Milk. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to go through some notes that I took on Lincoln Riley's press conference, and among those things, right, the national headline is going to be Lincoln Riley's not going to update on us on which players or how many players will be missing games due to COVID positives and contact tracing because he does not want to give a competitive advantage to teams that they're playing. Now, first, there's the joke here because you're a 40.5-point favorite to the books that are brave enough to put a line up for Oklahoma and Missouri State, and there's so many places that just don't want to put a line up because you probably don't have a line that is high enough because you have all these players that have not played that you want to see get reps against a team that's quite frankly not talented enough to beat them. And yet you're going to withhold information that is within the public good to know because, like, if there are 15 or 16 or 20 COVID positive OU players, the public deserves to know because this is a public health crisis. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and yet college football, college football. And it was about 20 minutes into the press conference before Lincoln Riley decided to tell us about a couple of the players that weren't asked in questions. And it kind of felt like double secret probation because in the way that you would talk about this, he's not giving us anything. As a matter of fact, he said we're close on a depth chart. A day after many other college football programs have already put out a depth chart. Like, I know what Texas's depth chart is, and I understand that Roschon Johnson is the number 2 tailback on the depth chart, and Keontae Ingram is the number 1. That was a point of contention among Texas fans and in the conversation around University of Texas football, like Tarek Black ahead of Brendan Eagles. That's a big deal. Riley has never actually liked putting out a depth chart to start the season. Last year, he put one out with the googly eye emojis that was passive-aggressive and going, there's your depth chart. He also does not want to talk about which players he expects to play a lot of football on Saturday. And even with Spencer Rattler, he tried to temper expectations when he was asked, hey, I've come to understand that Rattler is really, really magic when he's off schedule and making things happen, to which he says, we'll find out on Saturday. Look, dog, I understand that you have this way that you want to go about doing stuff, but I also understand that being secret at a time when everybody needs to be transparent is bad. Now, Riley's far from the only coach that has adopted this policy, and to Oklahoma's credit, they have been transparent about the number of COVID positives that they had during preseason camp. But joining guys like Ryan Silverfield at Memphis and saying that we're not going to tell you who's testing positive puts the rest of us at risk, right? And this is at a time when they're designing ways at the University of Oklahoma to try to get you from your garage door to your seat in the stands without bumping into anybody else. It's a neat trick that they're trying to pull off, but I doubt it, right? Now, on the other hand, we also have suspended players that are going to stay suspended. Trajan Bridges, Ramondre Stevenson, Ronnie Perkins, all out for Saturday's game as of today. Riley added that decision could change at any time, but that decision could have changed between now and January, and it hasn't. So I don't expect it to change before they play Missouri State, which means that you're down not just those players, but also Jalen Redmond, because a quick check of the online roster for the University of Oklahoma no longer shows a Jalen Redmond. So now you are having to depend on Marcus Stripling, Isaiah Thomas, Jordan Kelly, and a few others to make up the slack for missing guys like, of course, Redmond and Marcus Hicks to go along with Ronnie Perkins. As I have outlined on this show, Ronnie Perkins and Jalen Redmond combined for 12.5 sacks in 2019. Oklahoma only recorded 25.5 sacks. So that's 49% of your production that you don't have against Missouri State. Again, it's Missouri State, but we're not talking about beating Missouri State. We're talking about winning a Big 12 championship in a year in which everything is in flux. In a year where everybody has to have their head on an absolute swivel because you never know. You might see Spencer Rattler at quarterback. You might see Charleston Rambo because the entire quarterback room had COVID, right? And we have this long-running thought that if you have it once like chickenpox, you can't have it again. We have no data to support that. We also have data that shows that you can't get it again sometime after getting it in the first place. So I don't understand how that is necessarily a good thing that somebody had it. So your herd immunity ain't really factoring in. Plus, we are continuing to see college football games postponed and pushed back with increasing regularity. Like Temple and Navy was supposed to kick off in September. Now it's kicking off, September 17th. Now it's kicking off September 26th. A couple other notes that I made. He's thankful to be one of the leagues that is still taking a crack at this season. I think that the Big Ten kind of like rolled his eyes at that because, one, it's kind of out there that Riley's not necessarily enthusiastic about this season going on as scheduled, but he's got a job to do and he's getting paid $6 million to do it, so he's going to do it. Even if that means trying to do it in this age of, well, not anything going to plan. Another bit here that I thought was interesting that I wrote down is he declined to answer questions about what the depth chart might look like, except to say, I'm excited to see guys like Marcus Major, like TJ Pledger, get carries in 2020, as if he has a choice. There is no Ramondre Stevenson. Kennedy Brooks has opted out. Trey Sermon transferred to Ohio State. You really do have to bet on Marcus Major and TJ Pledger being good, and then you got to expect Seth McGowan to step up in a real way. Defensively, Nick Bonito could be really great. So could John Michael Terry and David Ugwebu. You should be pretty decent in the secondary. That also might be, in light of recent events, Oklahoma's strongest position group, all things considered. But the overarching theme of today is just what Lincoln Riley is willing to tell us that he knows and how much of what he knows is not actually good news. And I would make the argument as, a trained journalist that by definition, news is something that is reported that people don't want reported. Everything else is public relations or PR. There's no such thing as good news. There's only news, right? There's news and then there's, hey, we want to push out this statement. And in that vein, I want to touch on the last question that was given to Riley about the Unity campaign by University of Oklahoma and how the Big 12 is trying to combat racism. Riley tried to couch this in saying, we want to be better people. We want to look at the world and see people come together. He also wanted to say this is not to try to shame anybody. This is not to try to call anybody racist, to which I think you're missing the point, man. The point of Black Lives Matter and the point of us asking these questions of your mostly black football team is because your black football players, black men like myself, feel hunted. We don't feel safe. To say that we all want to come together misses that point because not everybody feels unsafe. Not everybody feels that this environment is dangerous. Not everybody feels like they're being taken advantage of or left to die in the way that some black folks feel they are. I think this is the beginning of something that could turn out to be very cool, but in launching a unity campaign and saying that it's about everybody, it's about nobody. You can't actually do that. You have to stand for something. Or more to the point, you have to tell me what you don't stand for, not what you do. Because in trying to include everybody in your campaign as a way of saying we want to wrap our arms around it is also not to make it feel like you know who's actually the most exposed here. If your house was on fire, I wouldn't look at all the houses and say, hey, I believe that all the houses can be here and not be on fire. That house is still on fire. I call the fire department and I put it out. And I try to help them rebuild. I try to help them salvage something. That's it for me. Deuces.